Like many other serial killers, was able to live two lives, was able to separate off his activities when he was out killing from his other daily activities.
Peter Sutcliffe took good care of Sonia, even in difficult times. She was struggling with mental illness.
She'd been a student in London at a teacher training college. When she had a severe schizophrenic episode, she kept taking her clothes off. She kept insisting that she was the second coming of the Lord. And she had a period as an inpatient in a psychiatric hospital in Bradford.
But Peter Sutcliffe stood by his wife.
When she was raging in some of her psychotic episodes with him, he protected her, would put his arms around her to try and kind of still her temper, but never actually abused his wife.
In fact, Sonia's illness helped Sutcliffe hide evidence of his crimes.
Sonia, in turn, was an obsessive about things like cleaning. She wanted Sutcliffe to change his clothes immediately he got home from work. He could wash his own clothes, which gave him, of course, plenty of excuses to get rid of any blood that was on any clothing.
By 1977, Peter Sutcliffe hadn't killed for over a year, but he wouldn't resist his desires forever.
I recall buying a new hammer from a hardware shop. It had a flat end on one side and a nail extractor on the other.
"28-year-old Irene Richardson was a prostitute who worked the street corners to make ends meet. Richardson was found dead the morning of February 6, 1977, in a park near the city of Leeds. Sutcliffe claimed his fourth victim 2 months later, 32-year-old Patricia Atkinson.
She was still making a gurgling noise when I left, but I knew she would not be in the state to tell anybody.
Despite the series of murders, there was little public outcry over the man the media now dubbed the Yorkshire Ripper.
All died in horrible, lonely circumstances. Maybe not died straight away. Awful conditions that they were left in, and just basically left to rot by some sadist.
There's no question that when the people who were being killed were prostitutes or, women of ill repute or whatever you want to say, people were less exercised about this. And it's a dreadful thing to say, but it's true.
There was a brutal logic to Sutcliffe's methods. His victims were all killed near his home in Heaton, England.
He started in a particular location, in a relatively small area around where he was living. Then after, in a sense, marking out the area that he felt it appropriate he could get away with his crimes.
With no substantial leads, police were baffled. The investigation simply overloaded their resources.
There was a huge amount of information came in fact, too much for the system that we had available to cope with. Back in the days of what I might call pencil and paper, indexing cards and putting them in a rotunda, and so it slows down the whole inquiry.
Nearly 100 officers were on the case. Thousands of homes were contacted, but there was no unified task force. Each murder was handled separately. Police continued to search the red light districts for the killer. But as he had done his whole life, Sutcliffe went about his business unnoticed, then receded into the background.
Sutcliffe was extremely clever. He struck at night. He struck very much in lonely areas. He could strike extremely quickly and not be seen by anybody. Trying to find somebody in those circumstances when they leave so few clues is exceptionally difficult.
Sutcliffe's confidence grew. 4 murders, and still the police had no idea who he was. As the whole of northern England began to fear a visit from the Yorkshire Ripper, he prepared to kill again.
He planned his murders. He had his own tools. He went out prepared to do evil, and he did do evil.
By June 1977, Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, had killed 4 prostitutes in northern England. But it was his 5th victim that drove the region into a state of terror.
The next one I did, I still feel terrible about. It was the young girl.
Jane MacDonald was a 16-year-old girl from the Chapelton section of Leeds.
She was a stunningly beautiful young woman with, I would say, film star looks.
Sutcliffe spotted her walking through town in the early morning hours of June 26, 1977.
At this time, the urge to kill was very strong.
He followed her until she reached an isolated area. Then he attacked, crushing her skull with his hammer and stabbing her more than 20 times. Her body was found later that morning.
Just a horrible scenario, sort of bundled into the dirt, horrific injuries. And there was this young girl, everything in front of her, whole life ahead of her, intelligent, and just taken by this, well, an animal.
You know, illness or...
Her parents, middle-class residents of Chapelton, were devastated.
I went to identify her, and I just got upset, and then...
Jane MacDonald's father died 2 years later. Some claim from a broken heart. Now that the Ripper had attacked a member of England's middle class, the public demanded action.
Just shocking for a young lass like that. She was beautiful. She's not a bit like...
You heard people saying, oh, well, an innocent victim. Of course, these poor prostitutes were just as much victims as anybody else, and it was a dreadful distinction to draw. But nevertheless, it did sharpen up people's view of these things, and they thought, oh, well, now, it could be anybody. It could be my wife. It could be my daughter.
Well, I think it's about time he was caught.
Everybody's really frightened about it.
Do you ever go out on your own now?
Never.
There was a huge public outcry from many, many groups. There was a very, very vociferous lobby from women's groups especially, who demanded curfews for men. They actually marched through the streets.
It's been reported that the police spent £1 million on trying to catch this killer just in the way of a media campaign. And they actually wanted to frighten the public, to persuade women in particular that they must take great care.
Police redoubled their efforts.
Assistant Chief Constable George Oldfield took charge and formed a specialised team to deal with those murders. Prior to that, the incidents of murder and attempted murder had been dealt with individually within the area where they had occurred.
Despite increased police scrutiny, Sutcliffe's confidence was growing with each murder. But on October 1st, 1977, he made a mistake. He left a brand new traceable £5 note on the body of a dead prostitute. Nearly 10 days after the murder, Sutcliffe went back to retrieve the bill.
Found the body still hidden in the place I left it. I pulled it from the bushes and pulled off her clothes. I went through them, desperately trying to find a £5 note.
He didn't find it, and so, in sheer anger and frustration, we now know that he tried to take her head off with a hacksaw blade.
Investigators, however, did find it, and were able to trace the note's serial number back to Sutcliffe's employer. Now, for the first time, Peter Sutcliffe was a suspect. But when the police arrived at his house to question him, his wife Sonia provided an alibi. She told them the truth. They were having a party the night of the murder. She didn't